Welcome to another episode. My name is Dean Vass. You can find me on X at hashtag Kangas, Instagram, hashtag Kangaroos Podcast. If everyone was listening to that, there's a car crash sound effect. And tonight, I welcome back Siobhan Rowe. A week is a long time in football, Siobhan. We're a rebel again. We turned the corner against the Blues, and then we look like a VFL team playing against the Hawks last week. I don't know where we're at, Siobhan. I've been thinking about it last few nights. I haven't slept. I've been awake for about 72 hours. Maybe you can give me some answers.
Hi, Dean. I would say it's great to be on, but that sound kind of it really does feel like it's hidden home for a lot of us supporters at the moment, and obviously it's a really big night for the club tomorrow night at Marvel Stadium, and it feels like it couldn't have really been a much worse time since we last spoke. And it's funny, like we had a really positive podcast. We spoke about how there's been very few injuries, the team's turned a corner, we're looking at finals the next few years, and then it seems like half the list is out injured, and we put in a pretty dismal performance against the Hawks. And I think the most disappointing part for me on the weekend was I really thought that we were over delivering sorts of performances like that. And there has to come a point in time where enough's enough with losses of that significance. And I didn't like the attitude, and I didn't like the messaging that came from the game. And maybe it's just a matter of frustration because I think us as supporters, we show up in record numbers, record membership, and it's time that this group, I think, grows up and actually starts rather than talking about finals and all these things, that we actually start looking at delivering maybe a few wins in a row and delivering good competitive performances over a period of time. And I understand we strung together a really good set of performances, competitive performances post the Good Friday disaster. But we still haven't quite, you know, we haven't delivered really. If you think about it, the game against West Coast, we were lucky to scrape through and win. And yes, we were competitive against good sides, got a draw against Brisbane. There have been steps taken forward, and we have won more games than we did last year. But I think it's silly to think that success is going to be linear, but the performance was really disappointing. I think we'll probably discuss this more in depth, but it probably showed that when our midfield don't fire and they get pantsed, the entire team look subpar. And I know that when the midfield group is getting smashed like that, every other part of the ground doesn't look as good. But the defense looks really poor, and I've always said that that's the part of the ground that I get most concerned about. And we've got a really tough challenge tomorrow night as well, where I think young Will Dawson will be playing on Sam Darcy, probably the most informed player, most talked about player in the game at the moment. Plenty to discuss further in the podcast about all of that, but it just felt like when the team aren't buying 110% in that team defense around the entire ground, like we brought against Carlton for 2.5 quarters, we look like a subpar team. Yeah, so it was just disappointing. The tackle numbers probably spoke a lot about maybe the mindset of the team. I think my frustration was we've achieved nothing, so don't think you can go out there and be competitive if you don't bring 110% and do that every week. And I know we're still growing, all of these things, but that it wasn't good enough. And I hope for a response tomorrow night, but it's almost as if now the excuses are going to be just some of the injuries that we've got too. So the car crash sound pretty much sums up how we all feel at the moment, I think, Dean. And you could probably speak to that too.
Well, what do you think about the messaging pretty much during the week? They've sort of all said the same thing, coaches, players. Our body of work over the last, in recent history has been pretty solid. This was the outlier. I kind of find it hard to believe because, like you sort of mentioned, the West Coast game, we were very lucky to get away with that. The first three quarters were as bad as this Hawthorn game. We've had about 8 good quarters since the bye and 8 horrible quarters. Like you sort of said, like that midfield, unless they're dominating, the rest of the team just goes with them. Like if they're getting beaten, Tom Powell, we talked him up last week. We sort of thought, well, he's turned a corner. He's starting to become a really consistent top line midfielder. Went missing big time against Hawthorn. 14 touches in that game and no centre clearances from 18 CBAs. we've had George Wardlaw. His form's been quite poor, even before the concussion. He only had 2 possessions in 2.5 quarters. The list goes on and on with the midfield. I mean, Parker, LDU battle hard, but generally speaking, one of them might, not so much Parker, but LDU might have the odd game where he gets 15, 20 touches, gets tagged out of it. And I don't want to rely on Parker either. At 32 years old, getting 28 CBAs, that concerns me as well. I thought we were a bit past that, like where the first 2 weeks after the bye, he was the second half, he went into the midfield. We don't want to rely on Luke Parker at 32 years old to carry the team. And we've sort of seen it. His body's banged up. He's had to be rested tomorrow or he's out injured. I'm not too sure. They've been very quiet about that. They've just said, he's gone in for x-rays. So, I mean, where do you sit with the messaging? We'll go back to that. I know it's a long-winded question. No, but, what do you think about the messaging?
Yeah, it didn't sit really well with me, Dean. And I know Clarkson potentially likes to protect his players. There might be a different message internally than there is externally. And I also think the last thing you want to do is to go into the game, which is a really big one for the club with our 100-year celebrations, sort of as beaten dogs, sort of like the way that he kind of is messaging about the game. And I know we've taken steps forward, but it just seemed as though it was kind of this review of the game was going to be brushed off, that it was a one-off. But it seems like we have had way more beltings than we have good performances. And if they're putting this as the outlier, then I think they've got the messaging very wrong. And I know you don't want to go full on sort of angry about it because Hawthorn are a very good side. I think it kind of sits in my guts in not the best way either, just because it is the Hawks and it feels like we were kind of on a similar trajectory to them. And we've spoken about this at length before, and we've kind of stagnated and stalled and they've just catapulted. They've been able to get those exciting free agents in Battle and Barras and to fill those holes, and they've drafted in a really strategic way. It hurt watching Nick Watson, and I mean, I'm not writing off Dersma yet, although there have been some rumours in the media around him as well. But it just feels like they've drafted in a way that I've always been critical of that. And we were talking a little bit off air too about just the list. And I think when the midfield gets beat, and like you said, I thought Power was disappointing, and we are relying a lot on Luke Parker. And I've been very, high praise about Luke Parker, but we didn't have him last year. And we won't have him tomorrow night. It'd be interesting to see how they go with that, almost like the general in there now for us. But when they get beat, the flaws and holes in the list that are as clear as day to see get exposed even further when they aren't on top. And that's just not a sustainable game plan to have the midfield on top and then everything else just falls apart around it. Look, I know maybe it is critical to be critical of the messaging, but they've achieved nothing, this group. They have, and I just thought it was a little bit strange to have comments around like, we'll move past it, and I don't know. I think this wasn't the outlier. I think we're so used to losing that last week was so incredible that I think we were so up and about because winning is a rare thing for us. But there's still holes everywhere, Dean. I know it's not going to be perfect, but I still get very nervous with Tassie coming in, and there still seems to be plenty of holes in the list. And it's more when they come in, the talent's going to get sucked up. Do we have enough there now to launch? The time to launch is next year. We'll talk a little bit about Colby, I'm sure, but he mentioned today he feels like this group is good enough to play finals next year. Are we? Are we getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, or what can we produce in the second half of the year? Because we don't want to fall back into old patterns where we have big losses. I think it was just more the magnitude of the loss that I think was a bit shocking for me.
That'll be a big improvement. That'll be, like, let's say we win 6.5 games, have to win another 6 games next year. And look, at this day and age, I think 13 or 14 wins has to get you in the finals. I don't think we'll improve that much over the next 6 to 12 months unless there's a dramatic improvement on those third to fourth year players and they take a big step forward. But we'll worry about that when it does come. It sort of seemed like not just with the players' attitudes and maybe even, some of the coaching decisions or anything like that last week, we couldn't even keep our feet, Siobhan. That was inexcusable. The amount of times we were slipping on the dewy grass because I clearly wearing the wrong boots and completely different brutes to Hawthorn, who kept their feet, and it cost us, probably a lot of, probably 3 or 4 goals early. I mean, that's pretty poor, and probably a lack of preparation and understanding of where you're playing and who you're playing and what ground you're playing on for that to happen, Siobhan. That's inexcusable just as much as the performance was.
It was strange, wasn't it, Dean? I couldn't quite put my finger on what was going on, but I agree with you. It was as if they couldn't quite keep their feet. The occasion. I mean, Launceston hasn't been a happy hunting ground for us for a little while, and we spoke about the round 24 performance, but felt like a bit of deja vu. It was almost like a repeat of that, unfortunately, for the group. But yeah, it looked like it was tough conditions out there, but for one side, which was a little bit hard to watch as well. And it was just the fundamentals, the basics that they really struggled with. And we looked really fumbly, not clean. The only real positive that came out of it, I thought, was we were talking about sort of who could win us the game, the heroes. And I thought Larky kicking 5 goals 3 was a real good step forward for him, but he didn't get the best delivery either. So it was a really good performance from him to deliver in that way, but didn't really give any of the forwards a really good opportunity. And when it did go in there, that forward line that looks like it's been really clicking well, couldn't make the most of any of their opportunities. And look, to score 60, not 5 points to Hawthorn 150. I mean, it just shows that when there's, like I mentioned earlier, no team defense buy-in, we just get absolutely smacked off the park. 7 goals to Gunston. Nick Watson looked like incredible form, and it was hard to watch maybe just the skill difference in the two sides as well. It was a difficult watch.
No, it was like men versus boys, and they've got a younger list than we do, so it's probably saying something. But look, it is what it is. We seem to struggle to match up against them, but we will move forward. And not all bad news, Siobhan. Colin McKercher re-signing today till 2028. It's funny that's it's a lot of people are already saying it's coinciding with Tassie coming in after that year. So, but you're never going to win with that. Even if he signed till 2030 or anything like that, then there would have been talk that he's still going to go back to Tassie. But I guess that's a positive. He has been quite good over the last few weeks, giving us drive from a half-back flank. Do you still see him there going across there when his contract is going into 2028 over the next 3 seasons?
Obviously, really good news. First of all, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think it's great that he's at another 2 years, and he probably silences the noise that would be very loud next year if he hadn't extended his contract. Obviously, with Tassie coming in, and we deal with that when it comes to it. But by the sounds of it, he's really enjoying his time at the Roos, and he had another 34 disposals on the weekend. And when he's up and going, and when the team's up and going, he's sort of that cream on the cake that he just looks really good. And against the Blues, those 2 goals and were really important, and his left foot is absolutely lethal. So his skill and run and class really shines through in a team that kind of has not a lot of that class. So he really shines like a star in there. Look, it's an interesting question. His role all year has kind of been a little bit muddled. I still think his best footy is off halfback. I still think that's where he gives us the best chance to score. I wish we could kind of clone him then, having one as playing as like a mid forward and one as a halfback. But him and Sheasel's roles as they develop through the club will be really interesting. I think on the weekend they got Sheasel's role wrong, and they probably got McKercher's role a little bit better. I still see him sort of shining in that position as a halfback that can occasionally sort of sneak forward and get that good snag off that left boot with his lethal kind of running and skill. So I'd probably position him there. Are you kind of the same thought?
Yeah, I think that's where he's found his consistency, and I don't know if we can put him anywhere else. To be honest with you, can't put him in a midfield. We've got too many midfielders as it is. He seems to look a halfback flanker, a rebounding halfback flanker. They effectively play as an extra midfielder now as well. He's never going to be a great defensive player, but at the end of the day, look, you just got to hope he gives you more offensively And, then he does defensively, and you just make up for those flaws. So, good bit of news. We kind of need something this week because it has been a bit of a somber few days. Nick Larkey, you mentioned him before. Do you think he's turned the corner? Found a little bit of form, 5 goals. I think you might have mentioned him last week. Did you say he's going to be a potential match winner or potential match winner in an 85-point loss at the end? But, look, he seemed to find a little bit.
Yeah, look, it was a really weird game because I sat there at the end of it and I was like, it feels very reminiscent of the days when we'd rely on Nick Larkey to kick majority of our score. And at the end of the day, he kicked 5 goals, and for the game, we kicked 9. So he certainly played a major role in that, and it's a good thing and it's a bad thing. I think it was great that he found a bit of form and looked really good. Early on, had a few sort of shaky moments, but that hopefully translates into this weekend and for the rest of the year. He hasn't quite been his usual self, but at the same time, that's allowed opportunities for Zurha, who unfortunately the first game of the year where he hasn't kicked a goal. So he's been in a very good vein of form, but couldn't quite find that on the weekend. And it's allowed Paul Curtis to really shine. And I think the forwards this year have done a great job, and we haven't been as reliant on Nick Larkey. The weekend, obviously, he had kicked more than half of our score, really, in terms of the total number of goals. But it was nice to see him get back to some good form. And I did say he's probably going to be the match winner if he gets up and going. And he was really the match winner.
Yeah, well, for us, he was our best player. So.
But he looked kind of back to his usual self, and that was good to see. And hopefully it translates because as much as we may not rely on him as much anymore. With Darling not playing this weekend, he probably needs to play a stronger role. And I think he'll probably get the match up on Rory Lobb.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about him. They got Lobb, Darcy, Norton. Oh, geez, this is going to be a tough game. We'll go through some injuries. We'll talk about that very soon. So, Bergman, Darcy Tucker out for the season. Nothing's changed there. Charlie Common's still out this week with the shoulder. Sort of got big question marks of why he played 2 weeks ago. But look at
Dean, I think the fact it is missed again probably suggests that they got it wrong against the Blues.
Yeah, look, I don't know if he's aggravated anything. I'm not too sure, or if it's just too sore to play. I certainly wouldn't risk him. Aiden Core still 3 to 4 weeks away. Eddie Ford's a test, so he's come in the last couple of weeks. So hopefully he can get back to the VFL soon. Jackson Archer missed out this week again, so he's out for another week. Jack Darling, groin, 1 or 2 weeks. Luke Parker out this week with bruises everywhere on his body. Luke McDonald out this week at least. Fisher, I think, is managed with a hammy, and signs of life. Josh Goda out of life support and a test for the VFL this week, Siobhan. That's very exciting.
It is. Absolutely it is. And I mentioned last week, the combination of Hardiman and Goda is one that I'm so excited to see. So let's hope for the best. And obviously with McDonald out, it would have been really exciting to have him available this week, but not to be. Hopefully we see him before the end of the year, because I think he's probably one of the most important players in this rebuild if we can get that back sort of running half backs up and going. I think that's how modern footy's played. If you can get a really good set of those, or 3 of them running and up and going, that's how you score a lot of the time in modern footy. So they'll be really good to see him up and going, and a good story as well. I mean, him and Coleman Jones doing the ACL their Achilles last was obviously devastating for them, and he's had so many setbacks post the Achilles that it'll just be good to see him out on the park too, for his confidence as a young player.
No, definitely. Hopefully we can get him back on the park soon. It generally happens when you do an Achilles, you'll generally get players. It usually takes them a good 2 years to get back, because they will do a lot of soft tissue injuries the year after 12 to 14 months being out. So hopefully this year's just a bit of a write-off, and he can come back into the preseason, hit the ground running, and we can get back to the player. Because I think there's potential for him to be our Josh Waddell from Hawthorn. Like, he's a very similar skill set, a lot of pace, good skill, good vertical leap. So, there's a lot to like there. We'll sort of see, if he has lost any pace because of the Achilles. But, look, there's still a lot of talent there. And I guess the one last injury I want to talk about, and this one certainly puts a cloud on his immediate future, is George Wardlaw, concussion. It says timeline to be decided. Look, there's not going to be any rush here. The club have come out and said that. They said they're not going to rush anything here. 3 concussions in his last 35 games. We've seen the effects on Angus Brayshaw. who had 4 or 5 in his career, and there's been a number of others. So we've got to be very careful here, don't we? And maybe even just bite the bullet, rule him out for the year, and try and get his head right, Siobhan.
Oh, 100%, Dean. Look, it doesn't. I don't know, Dean. It feels a little bit devastating for the kid. It really does. And if it's not his hammy, it's his concussions. And I think we're having a bit of a discussion off there whether or not it's a matter of technique and changing the way he plays, because it just felt like it was a bit of an innocuous incident. It wasn't a big collision where I mean, obviously everyone's different and it doesn't have to be a big collision, but it didn't feel right that he was concussed that way. And obviously his game is built around that aggression, that toughness, and if you took that away from him, sort of, I don't think it's something that you can breed out of someone's game. But I think we definitely go the conservative path. And I'm not an expert on head knocks or concussion or anything like that, but maybe just erring on the side of caution and getting him right for next year. But it just feels like this kid just can't have a clear run at it. If it's not one thing, it's another. And concussion is obviously a very serious issue in the game and society in general. And you saw what's happened most recently with McGovern having to be ruled out by the concussion board. And I'm not saying it's got to that point with George, but anymore, and he's just starting in his career. He's a kid, he's 19 years old, so it's a really sad situation, and I just really hope for his sake that he's not one of those sort of what if players that, you know, we never get to see the best of him because injury and concussion sort of limited his ability to do that. So wishing him all the best, and hopefully he can get himself right. And I think the club probably will take the conservative approach just for his own sort of life, let alone his football career. So yeah, it just doesn't have a good smell about it, unfortunately, Dean.
No, you can sort of tell even after the game when he was in the rooms, a lot of players went up to him and gave him a hug. It was almost a feeling for him because obviously they're a bit worried about him and worried about his health and so forth. I know the club have sort of downplayed it, so I said, no, it's just a slight head knock. It didn't look like that, judging by the players' reactions after the game. So, yeah, we'll have to wait and see what comes out of that. But I certainly wouldn't be taking any risks on him. And there's no point taking risks on anyone when you're not going to play finals.
Yeah.
And you want to give other players an opportunity anyway that have got their future to play for, whether it's at North Melbourne or at another club, or have an AFL future anyway. Whether they want to do that. So, and just look at a few players like that. So I'm going to move on. So we've got the Bulldogs tomorrow night in our centenary game. There's been a lot of talk about that. I won't go too much into that because I talked about that to death the other day. But I'll talk about some players that are crossed from the Bulldogs to the Roos. So a couple of players in the 90s you wouldn't remember. Greg Ebbleston, he only played one game for North after 102 with the Bulldogs. Keenan Reynolds was supposed to be a big-name recruit in the mid-90s. Played only 12 games for North Melbourne, supposed to be a key defender, didn't quite work out. Sam Power, the list manager for the Bulldogs now, played 39 games for North Melbourne, came in for a third-round draft pick. Poor man's version of his brother, Luke Power, unfortunately. So it didn't quite work out. Good run-with player. He was a bad little run-with player under Danny Laidley. Got the best out of him. Nathan, the Croatian sensation, Hrovat, 39 games, 21 goals. I was a bit surprised when I seen that. So, yeah, for North. Lockie Young, you'd obviously remember him recently, 35 games. And Caleb Daniel, 13 games. But the big one and the most successful one has to be Sean Higgins, 108 games, 96 goals, two-time BNF winner in 2018-19 and All-Australian in 2018. He was a quality footballer, wasn't he?
Incredible. We certainly got the best out of him. He kind of struggled to find consistency at the Dogs, but when he came across, oh boy, and he was pivotal in those finals that we won. And I think he was a great role model, and he probably, his impact even now is probably being felt in some of the players that are still at the club. He was around when Josh Simpkins sort of first got drafted, and I think his professionalism off the field, let alone his performances on the field, were just unbelievable and so silky, so smooth. Everyone could have done with the Sean Higgins. And I just loved what Brad Scott got out of him. Him and Waite sort of were the two that came across that were big success stories that couldn't quite find their best form at other clubs, but came in the twilight of their career across to us. And he was one of my favourite players to watch. Just really class is probably the word you use for Sean Higgins, and we could use a few of him at the moment in our side, Dean.
Yeah, oh yeah, 100%. He's had really good on both sides of his body. It's very
Yes.
rare this day and age that footballers are good on both sides of their body. But his left foot was just as good as his right foot. It was very undervalued. And yeah, a great player. He wasn't quite consistent enough at the Bulldogs, but when he came to North, found that consistency. And like you said, Brad Scott really got the best out of him. So yeah, no, he was definitely one of the best recruits we ever got in free agency and in the trade period, I think. He had a big impact. Do you want to mention anything about Nathan Rover, Lockie Young? Anything about them?
Lockie Young, not quite as good as his brother Hayden, who's currently
we always get the poor brother. So.
We talk about players that just aren't quite as good as their siblings. He's probably one of those ones. And obviously, Rover was serviceable, Dean. I mean, didn't quite hit the heights that maybe we'd hoped for him, but I think he's still involved with the girls program.
Yeah, the AFLW.
Yeah, so it has an impact at North at the moment in a different way. He was for where we were at and what we needed. I think he served a role, but didn't quite hit the heights that maybe we'd thought. But small forwards are quite important in the game, so you never know what he could have been if he'd kind of stayed on list. But a serviceable player nonetheless.
Yeah, he just didn't have that one defining skill. Like, he was very undersized, not quick enough, and didn't have a penetrating kick. So he just didn't have that. Like, if you're going to be that small, you've got to be that Brett Harvey sort of, be very quick. Yeah. Otherwise, you're just too small to play the
defining feature that kind of separates you from.
Yeah, that's right. So I think he was always a player that's going to be in and out of your team. Never had a real big ceiling, but look, he still had an AFL career. So yeah, he certainly did try. In the AFLW, we did get Jenna Bruton, who has played 57 games so far with 3 goals, 2-time AFLW premiership player, one with the Bulldogs and one with North last year, and our inaugural BNF winner in 2019. She's been a pretty good servant for the club so far.
Absolute superstar. She's probably my favourite outside of Jazz Garner, my favourite AFLW player for North, and she's one of those underrated players where she just does the grunt work and gets the ball out, and is undervalued for how good she's been for our side. So good on Jenna, and premiership player at the Dogs and at North actually, Dean. So excited for us.
No, definitely. Still doing some good things. So, look, our team is so good in the AFLW, she can't even get in the midfield. She just plays in half, in a forward 50. I wish we had that problem in the men's team, but still playing a valuable role. That's one of the good ones that we got from there. We might as well go to team changes then. So we've had to make a few. So Finbar Malley will come in for Jack Darling. Zane Dersma comes in, spoke about a little bit this week that he's a bit disgruntled. Bailey Scott comes in, had a good VFL game last week against the Hawks. Will Phillips comes in, and Cooper Harvey as well. Out of the team go Luke McDonald, Luke Parker, Jack Darling, George Wardlaw, all injured. I think Zach Fisher's injured. They've said managed, but I think there's a problem with his hamstring at the moment. Seems like hamstring soreness. What do you think about those changes? We've kind of had to force them, but and probably it's almost like for like with the players that have come out. Siobhan.
Oh, Dean, it's a weird one. I don't know how to feel about some of the changes, but at the same time, I'm excited by the fact that we look quite quick. And I've always said injecting sort of youth into the side is actually a positive thing, but you also can't replace experience. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think the loss of Luke McDonald is quite significant there. He's strung together a few, can't believe it, a few really impressive weeks, and his experience in that back half. And I'm just more devastated for him that he misses the centenary game as well, because he's a shin boner through and through. Yeah. So really disappointing for him. And Parker's, it's going to be really interesting to see how the midfield go without Parker, because I think we've almost become too over-reliant on him to be the fire starter and the warrior in there. So over to you, to LDU and Powell and Sheasel and the guy and Will Phillips in there that are going to have a really big responsibility. Quantum Pally and Liberatore and Bailey Dale and Ed Richards and these guys that run through there. And if they get too much supply into there, it's going to be a really ugly night for us. So over to them to kind of fill the hole of Parker. And obviously, yeah, you mentioned Fisher, and Fisher's, I reckon it's a hamstring issue as well. And Darling goes out, so it'll be interesting to see how the forward structure up without him there. But I'm also excited Finbar Maley gets his opportunity. He looked really good, and I was surprised that he went out of the side. His jukes are unbelievable, so it's his time to kind of shine. I think it's his time to convert as well. I think he does all the really good work with his marking and ability to get in the right positions. He just hasn't been able to finish off as well at AFL level. So excited for him. And same with Dersma. I think he'll probably end up being the sub, just my gut feel.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, yeah.
Which I can understand why, if the rumours are true, that he's frustrated his lack of opportunity. But I mean this in the best way possible. Has he been banging down the door, or is it a matter of that we have too many players in his position, or kind of how is this working out? I can understand though how he might feel a bit like he's not being able to show off his wares in the position that I think he's best suited to as a half forward. So hopefully he gets a chance to play at least a half or a full game and show us what he's got. I'm thrilled for Will Phillips. I think I don't think he'll be at the club next year, Dean. I think that's becoming quite obvious, but it's his opportunity to maybe market himself to another club or give all that he's got for this last part of the season. And I'm sure he will. He's a tackling machine. He gives us a lot of what our midfielders don't have, which is defensive sort of bones in their bodies. So that'll be a really good thing to have him in there. And he'll be tough and hard and do all the right things as he usually does. Cooper Harvey gets his opportunity, which is great with Fisher out of the side. So there is, and it'll be interesting to see the dynamic between Dill Stephens and Bailey Scott, with Dill Stephens having a disappointing game on the weekend, but clearly has come along leaps and bounds this year, which is excellent for him. So we'll see how those two work together. They're good ins. I was surprised to see Zach Banch not get an opportunity. I thought maybe that it was time to give him a go, and it'll be interesting to see for the rest of the year if they do bring him in. And even Geordie Payne to a certain extent. I know you've been pretty keen for him to come in, Dean, and maybe they just didn't want to quite roll the dice, and they wanted to give Harvey his opportunity, who's had a really good last few weeks, and I guess the centenary game as well probably came into their decision making potentially.
No, look, some interesting changes. A couple of people have come in with the chat. So Graham said 5 changes this week will indicate if the inconsistent improvement we've seen over the last few months are individual or systematic. I think it's a bit both, to be honest with you. So, yeah, but thanks for coming in, Graham. Wes came in just then. He sort of said, Curtis, Zerha, Costanti, and the wings don't defend the ball coming out of our forward line. Opposition halfbacks tear us up with no pressure, open the ball coming out. I think that's been a lot better this year. I mean, last year there was periods in our first half of the year where teams were walking it out of our forward line, whereas this year I think they're working a lot harder. I think Costanti, Curtis are averaging over 1 tackle per game inside our forward 50, which is a big improvement. I think Costanti does set some good standards with his defensive pressure. But yeah, with you mentioned Zach Banch, he might come in soon as well. So yeah, but yeah, players like Bailey Dale, they're going to have a field day against us. They got Bramble. Jesus, I don't know where they found him from, but he looks like a world beater. He was amazing last week. Jason Johannesson, he's still got a bit of football in him. Bailey Williams, they're a very quick team on Marvel. Siobhan, this game scares me, and I don't know who we're going to match up with on Sam Darcy as well. I think Mark mentioned the other day, Will Dawson. I think as far as height goes, he might be the best matchup.
This is going to be a very interesting game because I think it'll either be I have a bad feeling about the way this is going to go. Round one, they were missing a lot of their stars and they still found a way to win. And we've come a long way since round one, obviously, but it doesn't look good. Just in terms of the way that the matchups across the ground, who we don't have in, there's a lot of alarm bells ringing for me. Obviously, Sam Darcy, 208 centimeters. The only other key defenders that we've got in the side are Toby Pink at 194. and Griffin Logue at 193. So I think the obvious matchup is going to be Will Dawson. He's played 5 games of footy. Without Comben there, I think the matchup will be Dawson on Darcy, and it'll be the biggest challenge that he's faced in his 5-game career. And good luck to the kid. I mean, I don't think any of us are going to be sort of angry if Sam Darcy comes out and kicks 10. And I'm not saying that will happen, but it'll be a really big learning curve for him. And sometimes the only way out is through. So we'll see how he goes. It'll be a big ask. But the thing is, he needs to be supported and looked after by someone like Griffin Logue. And I'm not coming on here to pot shot players, but some of Griffin Logue's efforts on the weekends against Hawthorn, he'll look back on it. He'll be actually quite embarrassed with that. He was almost 20 seconds behind all the other Hawthorn forwards and gave them no chance to be able to actually come in as a team defense to kind of help out because he just let his man walk to the ball. So Pink and Logue have to support Will Dawson on tomorrow night. And I think he's probably without McDonald there, Logue's probably the most senior player in that back line, with Hardiman and Daniel, who won't be sort of at one-on-one defender in a sense. So it's a big night for Griffin Logue, if you ask me. And they'll all need to support Will Dawson if he's to play on Darcy. But obviously they've got their hands full with the likes of Norton, and there's plenty I could reel off in terms of their.
Yeah, they got those smalls. Vandermeer killed us last time. Riley West is a good little small forward as well. Yeah, so yeah, Lockie
McNeil is going to be key for sure.
Yeah, we're going to put pressure up the field, and hopefully that can cause a few long bombs, and we can be able to double team players like Darcy and Norton. And yeah, like you sort of said, Griffin Logue might be important, because he might get a matchup on like a Matthew Kennedy or a Cooper Hines, where he just where he floats off them and he's able to be third man up, be that intercept player. But we'll have to wait and see. I was thinking, like, is it time for maybe, if we get Will Phillips in, that he plays maybe a tag on? I don't know if he could play on Ed Richards, because Ed Richards is quite quick.
Absolutely.
Or maybe he goes on a Libba, and he can nullify him, who's a big player at their stoppages. Because we're not a great team, that maybe we look at tag, or maybe we send someone to, LeBont, who might play midfield. I don't know who that could be, whether it's Jai Simpkin or someone else that's got a defensive part in their body. Maybe Zane Dursma, just give him a try at that or something like that. But do you think we should play a little bit more negative tomorrow, as far as trying to stop, or quell one of their best midfielders or something like that?
It's a really good point you raise, because I think the issue with playing a tagging role on someone like Marcus Bontempelli is that he's such an all-round player that he can push forward and then destroy us there. And it's not as if Will Phillips can probably defend him out in the goal square. So I think it's hard to imagine a world where you're going to be able to stop someone like that. I thought our best chance of maybe nullifying his influence would be with someone like Luke Parker, who's not going to be there on the weekend, unfortunately. So it's really hard thing, Dean, because I think I feel like Phillips is good enough to have a great game on his own. But at the same time, Libba's probably the general in there where I think he gets them going with his sort of in and under work. So maybe we put a bit of extra time in Libba. I don't think you're stopping Bontempelli just with his size.
No, it won't be him. He won't play with him.
And it'll be a really interesting battle between Sherry and English, because I think Tim English is a really fine player as well. And if he's able to get on top there, it's not going to give our midfield as much of a chance, is it? So, they're a pretty. They've always been a tough matchup for us, and I just feel like it's going to be an interesting matchup overall, but the midfield battle is going to be quite an interesting one, because Bontempelli has a habit of getting 3 votes against us, unfortunately, T.
I mean, it sort of almost sets the tone in midfield. We've mentioned that throughout the podcast, that if they can perform, we can be competitive, but if they're going to get beaten again like they did last week, then it's going to be a long night, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is. Absolutely, it is. And I think that's the part that really worries me about this side, Dean, is that, how do I put it? If the midfield doesn't fire, we just look really poor. And I think that's a reflection on the pieces of Lego that Clarko has to play with, where I just think the list build, we've spoken about it at length, has been very skewed, and it just leaves other parts of the ground really vulnerable if we can't get on top in that area of the ground. And I think if they're not coming in with the mindset of that, with the way that we played in the second and third quarter against Carlton, with that the whole entire team defense buy-in, that it's going to be a really long night. So that's going to be the most important part. I mean, this team hasn't been able to string multiple wins in a row for a very, very long time. So, but they've gotten very used to poor performances many times in a row. So, um, let's just hope that I'm always looking for a response from the group, and I think a response is needed after the way we played against Hawthorn. But and I think that the fanfare and the hoo-ha around this week as well, with Dennis Pagan addressing the players before the game, there's obviously going to be quite a big sort of celebration before the game, and this week I think they've embraced the club as a whole and all things North Melbourne. So I wonder how much of an impact that's going to have on the group. Hearing Pagan, hearing past players embracing the club for all its flaws and all its glory, all of those things. Whether or not that's going to have the impact on the way they start the game, I think the start of the game is going to be really important as well. If they can get off to a good start, or it's game over by the time, which is what it felt like on the weekend against Hawthorn. So all these things are going to play a factor. And I think it's a really important game for Simpkin as well. I think we'll play a lot of midfield time with some of the players that we have out, and whether or not he can sort of stand his authority on the likes of Libba and Bont and Richards that run through there. So, yeah, big sort of game for that core group as well.
No, definitely. There's a lot going on tomorrow night, so definitely try and get to the game early if you are going. A couple of interesting players I wouldn't mind talking to you about. Cooper Harvey's been playing the last few weeks on the half-back flank. Do you think that's his role tomorrow? I've really been impressed with him, particularly last week. He tries to be proactive as soon as he gets a ball, where he tries to run and create. He's going to make mistakes. That's part of it. He's similar to his old man. Like, he'll try and create stuff that on his through instinct, not as quick as his old man. His skills are quite good. Do you see that as a role for him tomorrow night, that he's going to play in the back 6 or 7, however you want to put it? He's going to play there?
Oh, that's a really good point, Dean. I naturally thought that with Fisher out and some of the outs that we had, that would play as a half forward. But you could be right. You could be right.
Yeah,
I think he's the most dangerous there, and I think he's the most dangerous there in terms of the matchups and the way that the sides have structured up. But we could see him in that role. And especially with McDonald not there, and what do you think?
Yeah, I think he played. I don't think we've got many other options because we're out of halfback flankers.
Yeah,
I think Finn O'Sullivan's playing up the field now. They might put him back because we're depleted. But you got Peake, Logue, Dawson, Hardiman, Daniel as your probably back 5. And McKercher, sorry. So that's your back 6. So they probably need one more back there, whether it's Bailey Scott or Cooper Harvey. I think it's Cooper. They'll try Cooper Harvey there, to be honest with you. See how he goes. And he might play like a Riley Garcia or a Lockie McNeil or something like that. So, because a lot of Dogs do have a lot of small forwards. I'm interested to see that. I'm probably a little bit interested to see Zane Dersman's role as well. Look, like you said, he might start as a sub, but I don't know if he's going to get in that forward 50, Siobhan. Maybe he comes on for a Finbar Malley and he goes forward if we're a bit too tall. How do you see him?
It's a good question. I'll throw one back at you because I'm really interested in your thoughts in this, Dean. But how do you feel about sort of Clarkson morphing a lot of our players to be multi-dimensional? Do you think it's actually unsettling for the team, or do you think it's a positive that players have multiple positions that they can play?
I think this day and age, you kind of have to be versatile. You have to play a few, 2 or 3 positions at least. But you can't just move them around all the time. I was critical a little bit of what they've been doing with Will Dawson in the VFL.
Yes.
Pushing him forward, playing him as a ruck, second ruckman, and then the last week before he came in, I'll put him back in the back line now. I don't just let him develop in a position, let him get his skill set there, and then worry about other things as they come. If you see him as a defender, play him as a defender. If you see him as a forward, stick with him as a forward. So they've been a bit up and down with that. So, yeah, that's what I've been critical of there, the development of certain players, especially young kids. Like you see Riley Hardeman, he's just a rebound defender. He's learned his skill set very quickly and he's coming along very strongly. So, and Finbar Malley playing as a second forward in the VFL or number one forward, and he's developing his game there. He's not going to the back line. He's not going in the ruck. He's just learning his craft there. So I think it makes sense to have multiple positions. But when you're developing young kids, I think you've got to get them to learn a skill set first, and then you can develop the other parts of their game. That's how I see it. I'm no expert. I mean, Clarkson's a lot better coach than I'll ever be.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just how I see it, and I think that generally works. And like an Eddie Ford's a good example. Look, he's played forward, wing here and there. All right, let's just try him in the back line. He might be, and he was quite good before he got injured in the VFL. So he's 22. Yeah, he could try something a little bit different there. He might learn something. And he wasn't getting the game, so but as someone like Will Dawson, I'd like to see him if you're going to play in the back line, just stick him in the back line.
Yeah. That I agree with. I think maybe that's why Duursma's a little bit unsettled because
he's playing everywhere.
Yeah, and I think if you just say to him, son, play as a forward and let's see how you go in that position and show. I think he's got a lot of class and a lot of skill. He just hasn't quite consistently shown that, and that's probably why he hasn't had a fair run at it in the seniors. But look, I think it's a positive and it's a hindrance when you're kind of shifting players around all the time. And I think I was disappointed with the way they played Sheasel on the weekend. And I'm really curious to see where he plays against the Bulldogs. He's so talented and he's so classy, but I think it's almost like we're stifling that out of him a bit with the way that we're shifting him around. Look, again, I'm not Clarko. I'm not a genius coach. I'm none of these things. But just from the naked eye, I think maybe I think settling the team down is going to be a really good thing for us going forward.
Yeah, I mean, they've tried to settle Sheasel down a little bit half forward as a high half forward, playing as an extra mid almost. But I felt like early in the game, they probably should have thrown him straight in the midfield just to try something a little bit different. He pretty much every centre bounce was LDU and Parker. I'd like to see Parker out of the midfield, just out of that midfield, particularly in the first half of the game like they did those first 2 weeks. There's no rush. Look, fair enough against Carlton. Look, they've got the bigger bodies. All right, let's just make a statement. But I thought they could have – look, it's easy in hindsight, and we don't have a crystal ball. We didn't know how the game was going to go. But, I mean, he's 32 at the end of the day. We're still a young list. We don't need to be, bashing and crushing Luke Parker at the moment. So, but I would have liked to have seen Harry Sheasel go into the midfield a little bit earlier because the ball was going forward in the forward half. It was spent no time there, particularly early. So, it's going to be interesting.
Fortunately, Dean, for a lot of those players.
No, you can get frostbite sometimes playing in our forward line, like Nick Larkey did there for about 3 years, getting about 20 inside 50 entries per game. So, it's going to be interesting. And Bailey Scott comes in, played pretty much midfield last week. So be interesting to see what role he gets. I assume he goes back to his position on the wing. Or do you think they may be playing on the halfback flank like they have in previous years, trying to give a bit of rebound out of there?
Because we're so depleted potentially, that's a good thing about Bailey Scott. He's always been versatile. What the Dogs are very good at is running and gunning through the corridor, and they're a quick side and they play Marvel really well. So what I like about the changes is that we look quick. So I think we've got quite a few players that can maybe run and gun with them, but I'd like to think we were able to limit that a bit, because if we try and have a shootout with them, we're just going to get destroyed. So it'll be interesting to see how the game plays out in that perspective, but I think Bailey Scott will probably play majority on the wing, but he can also go at halfback and maybe give us a bit of drive as well.
Yeah, I'm actually excited to see how some of these players line up, and looking forward to seeing how Cooper Harvey goes particularly. So, and Will Dawson, if he does get the Sam Darcy matchup, see how he goes with that. So it'll be interesting to see that. Hopefully, we're still in the game by three-quarter time and, put in a competitive performance. We need to bounce back. So last time we played the Bulldogs was on a very warm summer night. We lost by 16 points. Simkin 30 touches in the goal, and Sheasel had 31 touches. Nick Larkey kicked 5 goals that night, like last week, so hopefully he can do that again. Paul Curtis kicked 3 that night as well. Cameron Zerha kicked 1 goal, 4 that night, so it could have been a good one for that. Last time we beat the Bulldogs, Siobhan, 2019, round 10.
Oh.
Yeah, Sean Higgins, 34 touches. Mason Wood, 22 touches and 3 goals.
Oh.
Todd Goldstein, 28 possessions and 57 hitouts. We almost forgot how good he was. The year before 2018, you might remember the Jack Zeeble kicking the winning goal with 20 seconds left.
How can you forget that? The toe poke from Benny Brown. And it was, I think by that stage, we'd actually won an unbelievable amount of games in a row, I think, at that stage in the year as well.
I think that might have been a couple of years before. That's round 14. I think we'd sort of been bouncing back. We'd start off slow. That was, so I remember Jared Waite celebrating. He must have been injured because he was in the coaches, one of the corporate boxes celebrating. Garner,
I think, that night.
Yeah, that's right. So a couple of players that played that game, Billy Hartung, Nathan Hrover, and Tom Murphy are some players that played that game 7 years ago. So it's going back a long time. And, it's fair to say they've had the wood on us since then. So are you confident at all, Siobhan, tomorrow that we can put in a competitive performance?
No.
I'm a bit the same, to be honest with you.
Look, I tried to be as positive as I could last week. And, I don't have a very good feeling. And 2019, the last time we beat the Dogs, doesn't necessarily surprise me. They've had the wood over us for a long time. And I think they're our kryptonite in many ways with their tall forwards and their pace and the way they play. I'm very nervous. I think the only area of weakness the Dogs have is that outside of lob, and I'm going to knock on wood as I say this, their tools aren't great. They're not sort of world beaters. So if we're able to maybe get enough supply and isolation for, Curtis and Larkey and Stanty and the guys down there, then maybe we're a chance to kick a winning score. But my God, do we need to try and limit the supply to their forwards, because it's going to be a long night if we let them have enough space and time and separation like the Hawks did against us. So I'd like to think that it would be a positive night to celebrate, the centenary sort of celebrations, but I just think it's going to be maybe a long evening for us. So, I'm not confident in a good outcome. But we can. I think if we played a really defensive-minded game, it's possible that we can limit the damage. But if we try that North ball style and we turn the ball over, we're in for a long night, a very long night.
Yeah, I think, I'm a bit nervous about this one, to be honest with you. The Bulldogs are a very good team. There's no doubt about that. Even though they're 8th, I'm a bit surprised by that. Have you got a potential match winner for tomorrow? You've been pretty good these last couple of weeks. You said Toby Pink, Nick Larkey. They've been our best players the last 2 weeks. Who you got for tomorrow?
Oh, this is it's a good one. I would say Will Dawson, but I don't want to put that much pressure on the kid. And I think without the support of his teammates, he might be in for a long night as well. But I'll say Paul Curtis, just because I don't feel like the Dogs have a really clear matchup for him. So if we are to be competitive and sort of kick a score up there with the Dogs, he's probably the guy to do it. And he's also had a pretty good record against the Dogs. So I'd say Paul Curtis for tomorrow night. How about you?
I was going to say Will Dawson as well, because you'll keep Sam Darcy goalless, possessionless, and everything. Yeah, but that's wishful thinking. I'll go Griffin Logue. He'll bounce back. So that's probably a controversial one, but yeah, I'm backing him. I'll back him to bounce back after a pretty ordinary game last week. So he'll be the third man up. He'll intercept everything and be a potential match winner. So what's your final prediction in saying all that?
Again, I hate coming on here and being negative, but I think that the Bulldogs probably by about 6 or 7 goals, and that's probably putting it mildly. If we're unable to limit the supply, and they just play Marvel so well, and like I said, they've probably got everything that we sort of struggle with. So I'll say that sort of margin, but It could be much closer. I think the pre-game hopefully gets the boys up and going, and hopefully Dennis eyeballs a few of them and really gets them going and gives an old-fashioned 90s sort of speech and spray to start the game off. And the start will be really important. I just think the Dogs are probably too good across the park, unfortunately for us.
Yeah, I think they will be. I don't think Dennis Pagan in his ripe old age, in his 70s now, that you were saying too much like sort of saying you're not going hard enough. I was talking to you off air about the Carey and Sam Newman podcast they did, and the things Carey was saying, but no, he's certainly not going to do that. But look, it'd be nice to see him. He actually had a good sense of humour, Dennis Pagan. I always liked his sayings and so forth. He came up with what do you say? Don't piss in my pocket and tell me it's raining and things like that. So so looking forward to seeing him. Hopefully I'll get there early enough to see some of his speech or something like that. I don't know if he's going out on the ground and doing anything, but we'll have to wait and see till tomorrow night. Anyway, Siobhan, I think I've held you up long enough. Any final words out there?
Look, I wanted to say it's going to be a really exciting night, barring the game. I think at some stage, I think the actual occasion is really really special, and it's a great time to be a North Melbourne supporter. As much as we've struggled, and it'll be really good once we get there. But it's been a tough sort of decade almost for us. It's a wonderful football club to support, and we embrace the struggle as much as any other team in the competition, and we're small but mighty, and it'll be nice to celebrate the club in its entirety tomorrow. And 100 years is so amazing that we actually got there as well, considering some of the challenges the club's faced not that long ago, really. So try and get there if you can, and embrace everything that the club sort of is and will be, I guess. So it'll be a nice evening to celebrate that sort of aspect of it.
Yeah, great final words there too, Siobhan. Very well summed up. Don't be like Carlton supporters and start setting your scarves on fire or anything like that, or going to Arden Street and do a graffiti and get the board out and so forth. So stick fat. That's all you can do. Keep turning up to games. We've been through this much pain. It's like a bad marriage. You just keep sticking through. Eventually it'll turn. You hope anyway after a bit of therapy. Anyway, Siobhan, thanks so much for coming on tonight. Hopefully we go another 360. We can be a bit more positive next week.
Fingers crossed, Dean. Let's hope that the damage, there's no car crash noise next week. Let's hope for the best. And if we manage to pull off a win, I think we'll be doing an emergency podcast after the game. You never know. But
definitely.
Pleasure to come on here again with you.
Yeah, no, always a pleasure with you, Siobhan. So, we'll have to, probably we'll do a podcast if we manage to pull off a win.
I will.
I think we won't be sleeping, that's for sure. So, we'll be on a high, almost a drug high. So, if we got that win, but we'll see how we go. Well, Siobhan, it's been a pleasure. And thank you to all your listeners as well. I'll be back later this week. I'm not too sure how my schedule is looking, but we'll have to review the game. We might be back tomorrow night. Who knows if we do pull off a miracle, but we'll see what happens. Don't forget, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, leave a comment, tell your mates and whoever about it. That's it from me and Siobhan. Bye for now and go Roos.